Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is Bill Miles with the Hilton Head-Bluffton Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the Chamber's Tele-Town Hall. We appreciate those of you who are dialing in this morning, also the listeners via the Beaufort County channel, and also watching on Facebook Live from a couple different entities. So thanks for joining in this morning. You know, I woke up this morning and certainly refreshing, a little cooler weather. Yesterday's rain cooled things off a little bit, and it's great to see as we move into October, and certainly still no storm activity in the Atlantic. And as we get ready to wind down hurricane season here in the next month and a half, 2 months or so, hopefully we'll get one gift in 2020. That'll be a good gift of not bringing any hurricanes our way. And speaking of storms, that's not to say we're without any political hurricane or two. Last night's debate was its own special type of storm, with both candidates offering different views on the U.S. economy, which, of course, isn't surprising. And no matter what side of the political fence you sit on, there's no denying that the election certainly will have an economic impact. And we're glad to be discussing that this morning, along with the overview of some of our low country challenges and success stories. Great lineup of speakers this morning. We'll have the senior economist with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the president of Sea Pines Resort. We're fortunate to have Dr. Jane Kelly with DHEC back with us again, and then also Kim Likins with the Boys and Girls Club. Our goal here at the Chamber continues to be to convene, convey, and connect our community. And last night, your Chamber, in partnership with the Low Country Speaker Series, we held a very successful virtual event with Dr. Scott Gottlieb. And Scott's the former head of the FDA, who certainly had an extremely interesting perspective on the pandemic. You know, unlike his appearances on CNN or other national news outlets, where he's also a frequent contributor, he was able to provide the partnership listeners with the opportunity to ask questions, and lots of questions were asked. And Dr. Gottlieb certainly had some very interesting takes on the pandemic during the forum. There's another one coming up in October that I want to mention, and Kelly will be placing that information in the chat box and a place for you to connect to the link and register for that if you were interested in doing so. I also encourage you to continue to tune in to our Tuesday Lunch with Lawmakers series. You'll be hearing from everyone from our town council candidates. We'll have national congressional delegation speakers running that will be speaking on our call-ins and hearing where they stand on different matters. And speaking of elections, I can't let the moment pass without saying a special thank you to those individuals and businesses who have stepped up to adopt a polling place. And your chamber and our partnering businesses provided breakfast and lunch to over 250 poll workers at over 50, I think about 56 different polling places. And we only have a few left to adopt. And if you have any interest in doing that, I would certainly encourage you to get in touch with Kathy Havens here at the Chamber of Commerce. And Kelly will also put her email address in there if you'd like to adopt one of those polling places. We'd be grateful if you would do so. Well, this morning, our first speaker certainly has a terrific background. He's been the senior economist at the American Bankers Association. He's also a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, focusing on tax and economic policy. Those of us close here to Hilton Head Island might be thinking of the Heritage Classic Foundation, but this is the national known Heritage Foundation. And he also serves today as he's the senior economist at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And in that role, he's tasked with tracking the U.S. economy and analysis of public policy on economic growth. And he's also testified many times before Congress on economic issues, and he's a well-regarded thought leader featured in outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, CNBC, and other numerous platforms. And I know those of you who have joined in before have heard some of his colleagues from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce speak, and certainly all terrific leaders for us in Washington, D.C., and on behalf of business. And with that said, I'm certainly pleased this morning to welcome the U.S. Chamber of Commerce senior economist, Curtis Dubay. And Curtis, welcome to our call, and thank you for dialing in this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's funny. I just recently got back from Hilton Head. We go down every year. We stayed for 2 weeks this year. We stayed in Sea Pines as we normally do right off of Greenwood Circle. We actually just got back on September 5th. So we enjoyed our time as we always do in Hilton Head, and we're right around the corner from you there on Chamber of Commerce Drive. So looking forward to coming back next summer. Before I get rolling, how long should I go for?
Curtis, if you have anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 10 to 12, and we'll get some questions in.
Sounds good. Okay. So,
and I want to say you do look refreshed and relaxed after your recent visit to Hilton Head Island, and thank you for coming here.
No problem. We always enjoy it. We have 3 kids, and they love going down in Sea Pines and riding their bikes all around, and they're already asking to go back, which we might if we continue to do distance learning here in Washington, D.C. for an extended period. So let's turn over to the economy. From a high level, there's a couple of things going on. So I'll go over some of these high level issues, and then with the remaining time, I'll show you some charts that I have that can help drive home the messages that I have here. From a very high level, the economy, we're in much better condition than we were during the height of the pandemic in April and May. So we bottomed out significantly after we went into what I call the Great Pause in middle of March. I date it from March 13th because that was the last day I was actually in the office at the Chamber of Commerce and the last day that my kids went to school. So the middle of March, we go into the Great Pause, which lasts for April and May, and then we slowly get an unpausing in June and through today with some bumps in the road, which the data really shows. But even though the economy is in much better condition, we have what is being referred to as the K-shaped recovery. And that's because back when this all started, the question was, well, what's the economy going to look like when we get out of this? Are we going to have a V-shaped event? We're going to go down really far and come back really fast? Is it going to be an L-shape, down, stay down for a while? Is it going to be a U? We're going to go down, stay down, and shoot back up? What's it going to be? Well, it turned out to be this K-shaped recovery, which means that it's kind of hard to understand because I didn't really get it at first. But if you take a K and you cut it in half horizontally, what we have is we have some industries and some sectors and some businesses that are on the top of the K. They've had a V-shaped recovery. They went down really far and they've bounced back pretty quickly. Think about tech companies that have done really well with the move to online, shipping companies, delivery companies, some retailers. The retail sector in general has had a very sharp recovery. But on the flip side, the bottom of the K are those industries that really cannot operate at full capacity or cannot operate at all. So restaurants, bars, those type of places, events, and sporting events, performances, things like that. They're not able to operate at all or at extremely reduced capacity. Those are at the bottom part of the K. Interesting enough, Disney having to lay off 28,000 workers yesterday. Again, theme parks cannot operate anywhere near where they used to prior to the pandemic. So we have this K-shaped event going on. It's also important to keep in mind that the virus is what's driving economic activity, and this will really drive home with a few of the charts that I have. As the virus goes, so too does the economy. This is an unusual situation. We've had an economic event that is comparable to the Great Depression and the Great Recession from 2007 and 2009. It's not hyperbolic to compare what we've gone through to those economic events. So we had a very steep contraction. But it was imposed upon it because of the virus. Usually when you have an event like this, it happens because of something that happens within the economy. So think about the Great Recession from 2007 and 2009. We had a financial crisis that triggered a problem in the housing market. And it took a long time to work those imbalances out. And we didn't really know how to get out of that. We didn't know what we had to do to get past it. It just took time. So this is different. So this is exogenous, what economists call exogenous. It's imposed from the outside. It's not endogenous, which means happening within the economy. And so that's actually helps with certainty. We know how to get past this. We know how to get the economy back to where it was prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has to end. We just don't know how to do that. But there is a degree of certainty that we don't have in a normal economic event like this. The other upside is that usually when you have a recession, there's spillovers, right? So something happens in the housing market, the financial sector, and we have spillovers into other aspects of the economy. And there's problems there that have to work out as well. We haven't had that yet. We haven't had a situation where there was a major imbalance or bubble exposed because of the Great Pause and the subsequent economic fallout. That's really good news. That doesn't mean it won't happen if we have another lockdown, if we have a resurgence of the virus. That could happen, and we see major companies laying off. It does indicate that there remains some softness in the economy. We haven't had a big issue exposed, and that's really good news. And it's also really good news that the U.S. economy is very resilient. That's what we've seen, and I'll show you in some charts as we go forward. That the economy has bounced back very strongly, and that's really good news. We are very resilient, and the tendency of the economy is to grow, and that will occur once we do get past the virus. I do think, though, that believe it or not, Washington deserves a little bit of credit for keeping the economy resilient. And when I say that, I say both the Federal Reserve and Congress and administrations. The Federal Reserve flooded the financial markets with liquidity as the pandemic hit. They learned the lesson of the Great Depression and the Great Recession really, really well. They knew what to do back in 2007 and 2009. They just didn't have the mechanism set up to do it. This time they knew, and they had the mechanisms. They had them set up from there, and so they hit go on all those different ways they have of getting the liquidity out there, and that's really helped buttress the financial system and kept things afloat there. So the Fed has done a really great job. On the other side, and you'll see this in some of the data I'll show, that the CARES Act, the pandemic relief payments, the $1,200 per person, the extra unemployment benefits, and the PPP loan program really helped the other side of the economy, businesses and families and individuals, and that's really helped keep things afloat through some very difficult time. As I said, the economy is growing again, which is really good, and it will continue to do so, but it will follow the path of the virus. So if the virus resurges, we'll see a slowdown in economic growth. If the virus continues to go down, then the economy will continue to improve. The last thing I'll leave you with before I get into the nitty-gritty data is that when you hear about economic data releases and data points for the foreseeable future, you have to look at two things. You have to look at the rate of change, so the rate of change over the month or the quarter, and the absolute level. So I'm going to show you two sets of slides that really drive this home. One is jobs, and the other is GDP. Those are having record high growth rates month to month or quarter to quarter, but their levels remain below where they were prior to the pandemic. And so you have to look at both sides to really get a sense of where things stand right now. So with that, I'll just go through. I'll share my screen with you and show you a few slides that I have that really drive home this idea that it's the virus that is driving economic growth or economic activity. So this is consumer sentiment. This is from the University of Michigan, and as you can see, it was I didn't put this out earlier. I should have pointed out the economy was doing really, really well in February before the pandemic struck. The job market was doing well. GDP growth was strong, and so things were in good shape. Consumers were very rosy about the economy. You can see the sentiment was 101 in February. It drops off a cliff. In April and May. It rebounds in June as the virus levels come down. Then as we get those resurgence in the South and in the West in late June and into July, consumer sentiment falls, and it's slowly rebounding in August and September. We will get final numbers. It might be today, actually. Today's the last day of the month, so probably get them today or tomorrow for this consumer sentiment from the University of Michigan. But we got consumer confidence from the conference board yesterday, and look at the huge tick up for September. So that was a preliminary number from the University of Michigan for September. This is a final number on consumer confidence from the conference board, and look at that, 18% growth in September after some really rough months in July and August. So I think consumers are doing better, but you can see how it tracks pretty closely what's going on with the virus. And so I think I put these up front because I think it's a good it's a good way to show again how the virus really drives economic activities. Because of course, if consumers are feeling good about the economy, they're spending more, and economic growth is stronger. It's pretty straightforward, pretty common sense. Another thing that's important in both these releases is that future expectations have gotten much stronger. The future expectations is the orange line in this one. This is in both sets of measures of consumer confidence. They both are growing faster than the current state of the economy, how consumers feel right now, that's really good. If the consumers feel that the economy is going to be better in the future, they're more likely to take on those bigger ticket items, things like houses, cars, electronics, appliances, things that often require financing, things that you're going to have to afford in the future. This is a good barometer saying that they feel like things are going to be good in the future. So maybe they're going to buy those bigger ticket, those durable items. And there's some evidence that is the case with durable goods sales. So that's good on the consumer confidence side. Unemployment claims still can remain persistently high. We're still at just under 1 million per week, which is, I've stopped looking at the absolute number because there's a lot of issues going on with the data collection on this. The trend is going right. We've gone way down since we were at almost 7 million unemployment claims for 1 week. The previous record was 695,000 in October of 1982. So we're 10 times that amount in the last week of March. We've come way down on people claiming unemployment, but the level does remain persistently high, which is frustrating. But people are going back to work, so continuing claims, those who have filed initial claims minus those who have come off, that has been steadily declining, which is good news because people are going back to work. This is the chart I really wanted to drive home on the rates versus levels. This is the job market as it existed in February. Back then, there were over 152 million jobs in the economy. It took from June of 2009 until February of 2020 for us to get to that level. That was the longest economic expansion on record in post-World War II history. And it took that long to have that many jobs created. And it took that long. What we were seeing back then, this was only a few months ago, was that jobs were being created the most at the lower skilled positions. And that was driving wages up for those with less skills and the lower end of the income scale. We've been wanting that for 10 years, for a decade. It took that long to get there. And it got wiped away because of the pandemic. It's really disappointing, and it's an unfortunate side effect. It's going to take a while to get back there. But so we lose 1.4 million jobs in March. We lose an additional 22 million jobs in April. It's mind-blowing. So we have over 23.5 million jobs lost in just a 2-month span. In the subsequent 4 months, we've had record job growth. We added 2.8 million in May. We added 4.8 million in June and 1.4 in both July and August. And so we've added, it's over 10 million jobs, almost 11 million jobs since April. That's really good news. But look at the red bar. We're still have a gap of 11.5 million jobs. So we're gonna have another strong growth. We'll get jobs numbers on Friday. I'm sure. My guess is September will be pretty strong. Before the pandemic, you're talking like 200,000 jobs a month was a really good month. We're going to have well over that. It might not be 1.4 million again. Certainly not going to be 4.8 million. But we're going to have another robust month of job growth. But we're still going to be. It's going to take a long time to work that 11.5 million job backlog off. So that's what I mean when I say rates versus levels. We're going to have strong monthly growth, but the level is going to remain below where it was for a long time. And by the way, this is separate than the unemployment rate. This is just number of jobs. Unemployment rate is a function of a lot of different things that are moving around. That'll come down more quickly. We'll probably be at 5 or below by the end of next year. But that number of jobs gap is going to persist for longer than that. And I'll just wrap up here with where we were and where we might be going. The second quarter was the biggest quarterly contraction on record. The previous biggest contraction was in 1958. And it was 10%. So we beat that by 10%, or by 3 times the amount. Just an enormous contraction in the second quarter. Funny enough, that contraction was because of the flu pandemic in 1958. Quick note on this: this is quarterly. This is annualized data. So it doesn't mean that we lost 1/3 of the economy in the second quarter. It's just how these numbers are presented. It's really confusing. But what it means is that it would have to decline by that much for 4 consecutive quarters. It's a weird way of presenting it. What it means is we lost about 9.5, 10% of economic activity in the second quarter. But that's how you'll hear the number presented, it'd be 32%. The flip side of that is that we are likely to have the strongest growth rate in the third quarter on record. The previous record was 16.7% in 1950. Today's last day of the third quarter. We're likely to hit these benchmarks somewhere here Some estimators see us growing at 35%. Some seeing us growing a little lower, on average about 25%. So we should eclipse the 16.7% growth rate in which was the previous record. And so you can see that the path of it doing well in the second quarter or at the end of 2019. We get the contraction in the first and second quarter, very steep. Growth in the third and fourth quarters is pretty good, and decent growth into 2021. But even with all that growth, it still takes us till, again, rates versus levels. It still takes us to the end of next year to get back to where we were, the level of GDP we had prior to the pandemic. So it's gonna take a while. This can move around. I anticipate it might actually move up into 2021. It can move back. It just depends on what these numbers actually come in at. It's just sensitive. The point isn't to get the date right. It's just a point out that we dug a really big hole, and it takes a long time to dig out of that hole, even with very strong and robust growth rates. Two last points. Really interesting. Incomes are now higher than they were prior to the pandemic. That seems, and this goes back to what I was talking about with the response from Washington. This is all government support. And in the last couple of months, people going back to work. But remember, the economy is doing really well in February. And to have income spikes in April, May, and into June, that's the pandemic relief payments, the $1,200 payments per person, and the extra $600 a week $600 a week unemployment benefits. That really boosted incomes in May, June, and July, and that helped keep consumption higher. Those have tailed off, and they're now expired. So there's been a big talk about consumption falling a whole lot. I don't think that's the case, and this is the last slide I'll use, because savings spiked. Savings spiked enormously, like 6 times from February into April. And that was because a couple things. One, those who were receiving government benefits were forward-looking and saw that those might run out and then saved them. And then for all of us, it's harder to spend during a pandemic than it is during normal times. So there's been a lot of savings that have been built up. So I think a lot of that money we'll be able to use to buttress consumption as we go forward and as those government payments run out. So I'm not as dour on consumption remaining strong going forward as some are right now. I'll stop there. I can go on all day, but I'll stop there. And any questions you have about anything I touched on today or anything that I didn't touch on, I'm happy to hear. So thank you, and look forward to hear your questions. Thanks.
All right, Curtis, thank you so much. Our first question this morning comes to us from Deb. And Deb is asking, the virus is currently the largest factor affecting the economy. What would you say is the second largest factor?
That's a good question. And I would say that it's off the board. It's not, so there's the virus, and then the next biggest thing, number 2, is so far down. But I would say it's uncertainty caused not just by the virus, but what happens in the aftermath. Like, do all these small businesses that are closed right now and have shut down, do they come back? And then the uncertainty coming from the election outcome and what happens afterwards. Those would be the two biggest things. And I say that because the policy uncertainty was the biggest thing impacting the business side of things before the pandemic. And I think that's still persisting, but the factors have shifted a little bit. But other than that, I think, again, as I said at the beginning, economy is really resilient, and it was in good shape before the pandemic. And I think it's still those foundations of a strong economy still remain. Whether we can maintain it through another surge in the virus, I don't know. But again, virus, and then all the uncertainty that comes a distant second.
Thank you. Next question comes to us from Ray, and Ray is asking, what are your thoughts on what another lockdown would do to our overall economy?
Yeah, so I think that there's no way to know. So I would have thought that the lockdown we had, the extent that we had it, and then the subsequent long period of, we're not in a lockdown, but this is not normal, would have been much more painful for the economy. So it's uncertain, but I think a second one, when I talked about at the beginning that we haven't had a bubble exposed or anything, I think that something else will trigger with another lockdown. And all those businesses that are teetering, the small businesses that you see with the signs in their windows, the restaurants, I don't see how a lot of them continue. So I think we'd see a huge number of business closures and a huge number of layoffs. And then a lot of people who are kind of going in and out of the labor market and on furlough would be put out of work permanently. And I think we go from a really bad economy to an economic catastrophe if we have another a potential economic catastrophe if we have another lockdown. It needs to be avoided at all costs.
Thank you for that answer, Curtis. Next question is coming to us this morning from Ted. And Ted is asking, which global trends will shape the world economy in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think the number one global issue is going to be trade, and which way do we go from here? And that's back to that uncertainty, that second issue, other than the virus. So do we go in the direction of more open trade, which makes us all more prosperous, or do we go in the opposite direction and we get a retrenchment and countries, not just us, but all countries turning inward and saying we're not going to engage in trade? And that could have really painful impacts on the global economy. So I think that's the main thing that will drive what happens on a global level in the coming years.
Okay, the next question is coming to us this morning from Linda. And Linda's asking, what's expected from the economy immediately following the election? I guess you've got a silver ball there.
So there won't be anything that will happen in the economy immediately after the election. What will shift is markets, because markets are forward-looking. I think for the most part, though, markets have priced in a Biden victory with a Democratic Senate. So I don't know if there'll be that much disruption in financial markets, but economically, the impact will not be felt until 2021, and then even then, it will be middle of 2021 after. So I think I'm not the political guy, but I think it's pretty much, again, priced in. People expect that if you have a Biden victory and if Biden wins, the Democrats are likely to win the Senate. They're going to wipe the filibuster. The filibuster is going to be gone as of January 2nd. And then that's when the economic impacts hit, because then they can push through major pieces of legislation in short order. So what you're looking at is things like cap and trade legislation or climate legislation that could be economically painful, tax increases, things that would ordinarily take and basically an entire legislative session that you would only get like one of those through. They're going to push through a bunch of them right up front. So that's the worry, but that we won't know that until later on, early in 2021, and then the impact of when those laws actually take place will come after.
Curtis, one more question for you, and that's coming from Kathy. And Kathy is asking what we can expect to see from our 401ks in 2021.
I have to preface it with I do not provide investment advice. So I think right now the markets are doing pretty well because they're forward-looking and they're looking past the pandemic, and they're seeing what I was talking about, which is that the U.S. economy is incredibly resilient, and that there's a lot of strength underlying the economy once you get past the pandemic. So that's all to the good, and I think that's priced in. What happens going into 2021 will be the impact of things that we just don't know yet, and we can't price in. But as long as we get past the pandemic and you don't have major political disruption, I think the economy will do well and the stock market will reflect that.
Curtis, thank you. I also had a message from one of our board of directors telling me I should ask you to come back on for our next board meeting, and they have loved to hear more. But thank you for your time today. Thank you for your support of Hilton Head Island, and again, congratulations to you and all your team there at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for the great things you do each and every day.
Thanks. Glad to come back anytime. Happy to do it. And I'll stop by when we're back in next August.
Please do. Hopefully it'll be before August, but I'll look forward to that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Our next speaker this morning comes from a local company and certainly serves as a great example of how organizations that are nimble and flexible certainly can be successful and adapt to change in the marketplace. And many have said, as Sea Pines Resort goes, so does Hilton Head Island. And fortunately, the investments that the Riverstone Group and under the leadership locally of Steve Birdwell have been making in the Sea Pines Resort over the last several years have certainly brought on world-class amenities that we can all be very, very proud of. Steve's been with the Sea Pines Resort since 1992, I believe it was, And then in 2006, he took over as the president of Sea Pines. And also want to recognize that Sea Pines is consistently ranked among the top resorts in the country with their 4-star inn and club at Harbor Town, which we're all very proud of. And they've certainly done a nice job this summer season, continuing to think out of the box and working on making a safe environment for all guests and associates. But today, Steve's with us to talk a little bit about the upcoming workforce housing project Sea Pines is undertaking. And Steve, welcome to the call and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for that introduction. 1992 makes me feel old. But good morning, everyone. Well, we're excited to move forward with our workforce development project. And we purchased a few years ago a 6.5-acre parcel that's off of Palmetto Bay Road. It also adjoins Target Road. And we've been studying the possible uses of the property and understanding our density rights and so forth over the last few years. And we're now ready to move forward with a new workforce housing project. And very pleased, we're going to take 1.3 acres of the 6.5-acre parcel, and we're going to build a 16-unit complex that is going to provide great new first-class housing for many of our staff members. We're going to do this in a flexible way. We're building 3-bedroom, 3-bath, fully stocked and fully furnished apartments. A total of 48 bedrooms. At full capacity, it could house up to 96 staff members. And we're really, really excited about it. And we think we've got a great plan. It's going to fit in nicely. We've got plenty of room for additional buildings if this is really a home run for the market. The design is very flexible, as I mentioned. It will be suitable for our international staff. It'll be great for families. We also intend to use it to attract new members coming to Sea Pines and to the island. And so there's many, many uses for the project now and in the future. We also plan to build a small clubhouse and activity lawn. The clubhouse, once we get past COVID here, will be used for small gatherings. The activity lawn will include a grilling area. It'd be great for recreation, and it'll be a centerpiece as you enter the project. The entrance for this part of the development will be off of Target Road, directly across the street from Captain Woody's. We considered the site for a while, and some of our criteria for selecting the site was, first of all, we wanted it to be on the south end of Hilton Head and close to Sea Pines because we wanted to minimize the transportation time and the transportation cost. We also wanted the housing to be close to amenities, close to grocery stores, close to restaurants, banks, pharmacies, town parks, and the town beaches. So this site is perfect for us. It's very close to our welcome center and close to all the workplaces that our employees will be utilizing. So we're really excited about the project. We have recently gained the approval of the town's design review board, and we're now working with the town on building permits. We are finalizing our contractor pricing. So I'm happy to say that we have about 6 contractors that were interested in building this project for us, and we're working with each of them on pricing now, and hope to begin the project this fall. And it should be about a 12-month construction cycle, so the housing will be available next fall. So that's really a summary of the project. It represents about a $4.5 million construction cost. That's on top of the land cost that we incurred a few years ago. So, Bill, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that people have about the project, but we're really excited to get it underway and to add this new housing to the island and to the employees here and staff members at Sea Pines.
Thank you, Steve. A few questions we have, and I certainly want to say your background there looks terrific, and I like it. Very nice. First question is coming to us from Erica, and Erica is asking, how did Sea Pines balance its workforce needs with summer visitors this year?
Well, it's, as you know, been a challenging year. We were fortunate to to get about 50 of our international staff members here before some of the programs were closed down. So we're fortunate to do that, and we initially we had to lay off and furlough quite a number of our staff members back in March because they're just the resort was being shut down. There just were no visitors here. But we were pleased that beginning in May, we could call back many of those staff members. And I think by Memorial Day, we had everyone back employed with Sea Pines again. And then we had our international staff members that joined us for the summer season as well.
John's asking about the resurgence of golf and what you've seen really since the pandemic at Sea Pines regarding golf.
Well, it's been amazing. You know, you never know what to expect, but you know, outdoor activity is what everybody wants to do, and it's great to see so many people out and enjoying our bike paths in Harbor Town. But our golf play has been has hit historic highs. We've never seen demand for golf that we've had this summer, and it's continuing into the fall season. We have over 40 golf groups that will be visiting us this fall. Many of them came during September. It's going to continue into the October and early November time as well. So I think throughout the country and certainly here in the Low Country, we've seen a demand for golf play that we have never seen before, and hopefully that can continue. You know, golf play for the past 20 years or so has been a concern because it hit a high 20 years ago, and then since then golf play had been falling off, and so we didn't know that it took a pandemic to get everybody out on the golf courses again. But it's been great to see so many players out there.
Well, Stephen, it's also been great that the foresight that you had and Riverstone had in the upgrades to the golf courses that you all have done, and certainly providing a very high quality level of play. Another question comes to us, Steve, is asking if there are any redevelopment plans for you and your company inside the gates of Sea Pines on any of your other assets there.
Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. We have been planning additional improvements for many years, and we've completed some of those with our new clubhouses and our beach club, and all of our golf courses, as Bill mentioned, have been renovated. And we're going to continue those improvements. And we are working with architects currently and hope to gain final approval from our board later this year to build a new quarterdeck. The quarterdeck, as you know, is a tremendous location there at the entrance to Harbor Town. It's been a great property and just a mainstay of Harbor Town for decades. And but the building is aged, it's dated, and it's not what we want to present for the future. So we are planning a new restaurant, which will include a new first floor restaurant and then a rooftop bar and grill. And we think it's going to be a great new addition to Harbor Town, and hope that we can gain final approval from our ownership and board this fall. And then we'll be working with the town and the Sea Pines ARB on final plans. And we'd like to start that project sometime at the beginning of the first half of 2021. It's going to be a really exciting new property for Harbor Town and some new energy into Harbor Town. We're going to need to work on our parking down there as well. As everybody knows, parking in Harbor Town, especially in the season, is at a premium. And so we're going to have to be working towards some solutions in parking in Harbor Town. But we're excited about that. We continue to plan an expansion to the Inn and Club at Harbor Town, and it's desperately needed. That project will include a new resort swimming pool. We're looking at new meeting facilities and a new spa, fitness, and many things that we've got to do for the future. And we're going to continue to work towards approval of those projects in the future as well.
Congratulations on those. Those are that's exciting news there as well, Steve. Very exciting. Question from Linda. Linda's asking if the new housing project that you're describing, will the housing be used year-round by your staff?
Yes, we're planning to use it year-round. We have many uses for the project, and I'm sure there'll be some downtimes, but we're going to try to minimize those, and we want to utilize the staffing to the best advantage that we can use it, and to house people there. And I think it's going to be a fantastic place for people to live and to be close to the south end of the island.
Just a message here from Bob who had sent in, and Bob was saying thank you for switching to the takeout service that you did early on during the pandemic, and living in Sea Pines certainly enjoyed being able to utilize that.
Well, that's great, Bob. I appreciate that, and we've continued with that curbside pickup and delivery, and as long as people are continuing to utilize it, we'll continue that service.
Steve, thanks for coming on this morning and giving us the updates. Congratulations on the exciting news with the housing project, as well as the other plans for the quarter deck. And thanks to you and your team there locally, as well as the Riverstone Group, for the investment that you continue to make in Sea Pines Resort, as well as for Hilton Head Island.
Thank you, Bill, and everybody enjoy this beautiful fall weather we finally have.
All right, Steve, we'll see you soon. Thank you. All right, that was Steve Birdwell, and certainly some exciting news coming ahead for Sea Pines Resort. Since our very first Teletown Hall back in March, the importance and presence of DHEC on our calls has certainly been constant, and we're very appreciative of that. And we're pleased to welcome back today Dr. Jane Kelly with DHEC. And Dr. Kelly, thank you for joining us again. We're looking forward to your update.
Thank you. And I'll tell you, I feel privileged to join this call. I learned so much from the other presenters. So this has been a great opportunity for me. Thank you for asking me to join. What I'd like to do today is to spend 5 minutes focusing on vaccines, describing how vaccines work and what's special about this virus, because I think as there is vaccine rollout, there are going to be a lot of questions, and it might be helpful to set the stage now to do the groundwork about understanding some things about how the immune system works and what's unique about what's going on right now with vaccine development. But before I get there, let's talk about the numbers. There has been some change in our data completeness. So I'm going to talk about larger numbers for the state as a whole this week. That doesn't necessarily represent a dramatic uptick in cases. There are a couple of things going on. College and university campuses are sometimes doing their own point of care tests. And there's been some delay in their getting their information to us. That doesn't change how people were treated. You know, people who had a positive test found out about it right away, but there was a delay in getting some of those numbers into our system. And also tests done on people who live in South Carolina, but were tested in another state, especially in Augusta, Georgia. There was a backlog in getting some of those numbers into our system. So over the past week, we have a new number of confirmed cases, which is 8,611. That doesn't mean we had 8,600 new cases in the past week, diagnosed in the past week. It reflects that backlog. But that brings our total number in South Carolina to 143,495 statewide. We have 133 new confirmed deaths for the entire state, bringing a total of 3,173. Beaufort County had 238 new confirmed cases for a total of 5,629. There were 2 new confirmed deaths in Beaufort County for a total of 80 confirmed deaths. For Hilton Head, zip codes 29929 and 29928, there were 28 new confirmed cases for a total of 1,004. And for Bluffton, there were 92 new confirmed cases for a total of 1,637. Any questions about that issue with the backlog and data completeness, what that means? I mean, you guys are all numbers people. I think you understand the challenges of gathering data and that sometimes there is some catch up like that.
Yes, one question semi-related to that is a question from Steve. And Steve is asking what the recovery rate is of those that test positive for COVID.
And the recovery rate, it is about 93% of those that we know. And so the challenge here is that how do you determine a recovery rate? Well, certainly it reflects survival, how many people have died. And fortunately, the numbers of deaths are decreasing. Even as our number of positive cases increases, the percent that are dying are decreasing. In terms of recovery, it's still around 93%, but that does not necessarily reflect every case. We are determining recovery by looking at people who reported symptoms and then the symptoms resolved, or were hospitalized and then discharged and the condition has resolved. There are still some people who are having lingering side effects, lingering symptoms weeks to months after diagnosis. So that's a remaining concern.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. So,
okay.
I hope you are interested in learning the vaccine information. I hope I don't put anybody to sleep in talking about a little bit about background of how the immune system works and how vaccines work. But I think it's going to be important to understand because we're going to have several different vaccines, I think, coming to the market and a lot of questions about them. So to back up just for a couple of minutes to describe how the immune system works, the immune system has several different pieces. Part of it is something called innate immunity. That's like the first inflammation, first on the scene, and it's non-specific. It's like the runny nose that reacts to a cold. It is the first part of your body's response while you're building antibodies and something called T cells. Normally, when you have a bacteria or a viral invader, your body recognizes it as a foreign protein, your immune system responds, but it takes a little while to make those antibodies and get your T cells revved up. That's why when you get, for example, catch a cold, you get some symptoms as your innate non-specific immune system reacts. And then when it goes away around day 7 to 10, that's because your antibodies start to kick in and they fight off the virus. Now, how do vaccines work? Well, the earliest vaccines in this country, the polio vaccines in the 50s, what they did was they wanted to give your immune system sort of a sneak preview, expose your antibody making cells and your T cells to the virus ahead of time to get your system kick-started so you don't get the disease. So those polio virus vaccines, they took a whole virus, the polio virus, and then either weakened it or outright killed it so that you had a dead, inactivated virus. And then that was injected into people or given by an oral polio dose. And your system responded to that dead virus without you getting sick from the virus. There's some risks in those kind of inactivated vaccines. There's always the concern that somehow there would be a mutation so that virus would become live and no longer weakened. So we don't have a lot of vaccines that use that mechanism. Instead, what we've learned over decades is that you don't necessarily have to give the whole virus. You could just expose the immune system to some subunit of the virus, like a protein on its surface. And in fact, that's how, for example, the pneumonia vaccine works, or the hepatitis B vaccine. But there, in more recent years, have been things called vector viruses. And those are being used in this the COVID-19 vaccines as well. I think of this as like a Trojan horse. You take a benign virus, it could even be a virus from another animal that doesn't normally infect humans. Take a benign virus, but you stick on a protein or a piece of the genetic code from the virus you want to create a vaccine to. I mean, it's a very clever approach. This was used in the Ebola virus vaccine. It's in the Zika virus vaccine. So this is a more recent approach. There are other approaches, but I think these are the major ones. I'd like to just stop here and just move to talking about COVID-19. What is special about this virus? Well, you've probably all seen an image of it. It looks like a round ball with a bunch of spikes sticking out, sort of like a crown. That round ball contains RNA, that's the gene, the genetic instructions for making more virus in this protein coat. And those spikes that are sticking up are literally called the spike receptor. The spike receptor sticks to an attachment site on the cell, and it undergoes a physical change. It's almost like a spring-loaded mechanism where it attaches to the cell, and then it undergoes a change and shoots that RNA, those genetic instructions, into the cell, and the cell starts making more virus. So nearly all of the vaccines that are currently being made are not using that weakened whole virus approach. Instead, what they're focusing on is that spike protein. If you can get a vaccine that will, so that your antibodies and T cells will recognize that spike protein, you could protect yourself from the virus even getting in the cell. The next thing I'd like to talk about is this vaccine development. How could it go this fast? Because I know there's a lot of concern about how can it be safe if it's being developed this fast? And I wanted to mention 3 unique factors in this situation. One is we got a head start in vaccine development, because you remember in 2003 when there was SARS event, I mean, they started vaccine development, but work stopped because SARS was contained, and there were, I think, about 800 cases worldwide, but then it was contained. So they stopped on the vaccine development. But SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is really closely related to this original SARS. So we've had a head start there. Number 2, and this is unique to this era, that we now can do genome sequencing. And the genomic sequence, the actual blueprint of this virus, was released January 10th. I mean, this was the first in vaccine development. You've got the genetic code. You've got the script in front of you, so that you could target, you could identify what's the genetic code for the spike protein, target that gene, and make instructions for making that spike protein into your vaccine. And the third is business reasons. And I'd be interested in your input on this. Usually vaccine companies proceed very cautiously. Studying vaccines in monkeys and in humans is expensive, so they do it in very small steps. First they'll vaccinate mice, and if there are side effects or it looks like, oh, this is not going to be a good vaccine, then they drop it and don't go any further with doing it in monkeys, let alone doing anything in human studies. But if the vaccine's okay in mice, then they go to monkeys. If it's okay in monkeys, they go to small groups in humans. They don't want to take a risk in investing in a large, expensive study, only to find out the vaccine has too many side effects or it doesn't work as well as they'd hoped. But by the federal government's investing and promising to buy many doses, companies didn't have to hold back because of their business model, and that accelerated the timeline. So I'd like at this point to stop there. I mean, there's still a lot we don't know, and I didn't talk about specific virus vaccines. I can, if you wish, on this call or in the future. But we're still waiting for information with regards to safety and efficacy, how well this vaccines may work. And we've got multiple vaccines in development. Some might be good for certain populations, for example, the elderly. Some might be better for children. It's going to be a while before we have the post-vaccination safety data. It's going to be a while before we roll it out to immunize as many people as need to be for us to have herd immunity in America. But let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thanks for that update, and certainly very informative. Our first question is coming from Tom this morning, and Tom is asking you to please comment on the efficacy of continuing the mandate on face masks.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's going to take both. It's going to take both what we call hygienic methods, masks, distancing, hand washing, and the vaccine. I mean, think about how long it's going to take to roll out this vaccine, and not everybody's going to take it. Not everybody is going to want to take a vaccine. But even of those who do want to take a vaccine, it's going to take a while for distribution and getting it out there. If you think about it, if you have, nothing in life is 100%, and that includes vaccines. if we have a 75% effective vaccine, you're going to need to immunize 2/3 of America to get that R naught, that transmission number, less than 1. So we're going to need to still have those hygienic methods in place until we get to that point with the vaccine. Oops, sorry, I'm calling from home and my dog is commenting. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Let's move on to another question. And the next question is coming from Carolyn. And Carolyn is asking what you expect to see as far as numbers of flu cases this year due to COVID precautions.
Well, we're cautiously optimistic for two reasons. One is looking at what happened in the flu season in the Southern Hemisphere. They're the opposite seasons from us. And for whatever reason, whether it was social distancing and masks or the nature of the virus or immunizations, the Southern Hemisphere did not see a surge in flu cases. They had a very low number of influenza cases. So we're hoping that might be true for us as well. Nevertheless, I think it's important that we keep the recommendation of everyone getting a flu vaccine as a strong recommendation. But we're hoping that the efforts that are in place for countering COVID-19 with masks, distancing, hand washing will work for influenza as well.
Okay, thank you. And next question is coming from James. And James is asking do you expect to see a surge in the fall?
Well, that's whatever. Yes, I think that is a concern. Here's the good news. We have not seen a surge in schools and K through 12 and childcare centers. So I think that's a combination of really careful planning and some success in prevention of transmission from children to one another and from children to their family members when they go back home. So that's something that we were very worried about. And, the fall has just begun. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that the number of school cases will remain low. Of concern, however, are the older students, the college-age students. We've seen a real shift in the average age of people who are newly diagnosed with COVID-19, and it is definitely the age 20 to 30 numbers. That age group is now become our highest incidence group. That's not true for just South Carolina, that's true nationally as well. So a lot of containment of surge is going to depend upon what is happening on college campuses, honestly. Cases are decreasing in nursing homes, which is a very good piece of news. The college campuses are putting in place their control measures, but it's a new concept for college and university students to understand how to live with social distancing. So I think what surge we may have is going to be in that age group, and getting the message across to that age group is what's going to be most important.
Dr. Kelly, thank you. That's going to cover our questions this morning. We hope that you'll keep us on your agenda for next week, and thank you for the great information that you provided today as well as last week, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, and please let me know what you would like me to focus on in the future.
Okay, we'll do that. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
We all know that our businesses and families and schools could not do without those who provide the so important after-school care as well as so much more. And organizations like the Island Rec Center, the Boys and Girls Club have also had to completely revamp their programming to meet the needs of the Lowcountry families during the pandemic. And you'll think back to our successful Path Forward Readiness Plan, which garnered input from 9 different public task force teams. This one just happened to be chaired by our next speaker, and that was the Child Care Group. And she's the executive director of the Hilton Head-Island Boys and Girls Club, and her organization has done a tremendous job of helping to educate students during the district's virtual learning period. And And Kim, we appreciate Kim Likins being on the call today, as well as chairing that very important child care task force that we had back in March. And Kim, it's been a lot of change for you, and we're looking forward to hearing you comment on the things that are going on at the Boys and Girls Club.
Good morning. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate so much the opportunity to share with everyone a glimpse into the world of childcare in the midst of COVID-19 and the vital role that community organizations have taken on to ensure that our children do have a sense of normalcy back in their lives. We also appreciate the Chamber's willingness to include all of us in the Path Forward Task Force initiative. After working diligently to modify our service delivery models to ensure safety protocols, which included health screens and social distancing practices, most childcare organizations reopened over the summer, so parents did have the opportunity to go back to work. The Boys and Girls Club of Hilton Head served 100 children full day all summer. Our club members were so happy to return to the life that had been lost to them for so many months. And as one of our staff members described it, the club was filled with an energy and an excitement that can really only come from a child's happy heart. And we're thrilled to report, just kind of as Dr. Kelly explained, we had no illnesses all summer long at the Boys and Girls Club. We also realized early on in the summer that most likely the school year going forward was going to look very different and would need to include some form of virtual learning. And we knew that the community organizations were going to need to step forward again to help create distant learning pods for parents who needed to go back to work, and also those that just simply didn't have the ability to help their children with virtual learning. And fortunately, many organizations have, including a lot of our island churches. The Boys and Girls Club has been able to convert our traditional after-school program into a full-day distant learning program that also includes after-school enrichment and operates until 5:30 in the evenings for 72 children. When we opened our registration for this program, we filled up in less than an hour. And we currently have about 60 on our wait list. Rarely does a day go by that I don't receive a phone call from a distressed parent who is really struggling with childcare needs. And our unique learning environment provides kids in grades kindergarten through 8 with supervised computers, Wi-Fi, and learning facilitators. The children are in pods of 12 based on age and their school. And our staff has really worked to form strong relationships with their teachers so that we could create not only a safe environment, but have a strong, effective learning environment. And the kids, I'm happy to report, have adapted beautifully. It is a joy to see them working so hard to achieve academic success in this new virtual world. As Beaufort County School District moves to this new hybrid model starting next week, we will, at the Boys and Girls Club, continue to operate our distant learning program. Some children will go face-to-face and then come to us on their independent learning days, and then also come to us after school. Other children, about a third of the kids that we're serving, their parents have chosen to have them stay with us full day, 5 days a week for distant learning. And we will continue to be nimble and flexible and do whatever it takes to support the Beaufort County School District as they go forward making decisions in the future. And we're so grateful that parents continue to support our efforts and are strong partners with us and dedicated to seeing us guide their children through this new educational paradigm. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks for that update. And the first question is coming to us from Bob. And Bob is asking what you see as your biggest challenge as schools reopen.
Well, our biggest challenge is continuing to provide the social distancing that we've been able to do. Now that kids will go back to school and then come back to us in the afternoon, we know that they will go and be exposed to many other children and then come back to us and also come back to us on alternative days. So the bubble that we were able to create this summer and have been able to create thus far is going to be expanding. And so we're just going to have to remain incredibly diligent with our practices of making sure that we're doing lots of hand washing, sanitizing, keeping our mask on, and doing the best we can for social distancing.
Thank you for that answer. The next question is coming from Steve. And Steve is asking, how closely do you work with the school district to coordinate offerings?
We're working very closely with the school district. We have a weekly call with Dr. Rodriguez's education department that kind of gives us an overview of what their plans are. And they're actually leaving quite a bit of the decisions to the local schools. And that's fortunate for us because we have strong relationships with most of the principals and actually have teachers that work in our after school programs. So we've been able to get information as quickly as it's been coming out.
Kim, I know that pre-pandemic that funding is always a challenge, and current pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about your current funding challenges?
Absolutely. And, Bill, when you mention that, I would be remiss to say if it wasn't just Boys and Girls Club, it's really all of the organizations that are out there, that are stepping up to do this. The Children's Center, the Island Rec Center, the Sandbox Children's Museum. I mean, there's just so many that are working to support our children and our families to be able to continue to work. But it's a huge impact on the financials of our organizations. Most of us are going to struggle this coming year to actually make our regular budget, and then to do this type of extra work on top of that increases the expenses, particularly when you look at the PPE and the sanitizing that has to be done constantly for the environments to remain safe for the children. So we will continue to look for support through businesses, individuals, and have been really working hard for some government support as well.
Kim, I know early on we were able to provide some thermometers and other tools there that were needed. And please reach out to us and give us another wish list that we can take to the business community and see what we might be able to, or how those businesses might be able to help you in some of your needs, because the job that you and your team there at the Boys and Girls Club do is incredible. And we certainly want to have business do its part as well to help you and the other organizations.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And I will be sure to share that with my counterparts so that they can reach out to you as well.
Kim, one last comment, and this one's coming from Linda. This one says, Kim does an amazing job. Well done, Kim. Thought I'd share that with you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's always an honor.
Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Kim.
Take care.
All right. That's going to conclude our call for this morning. And thank you all for listening. And as we like to say, continue to be kind, be safe, and wear your mask. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.